You see what I did there? I did the same exact thing with my top 10 best Sonic games list, where I made the number 1 choice a full-out review. You know, I've been wanting to play a really good anime-style JRPG. I don't know if Final Fantasy 15 counts, because, well, look at it. But during the PS2 era, I couldn't get enough of JRPGs. So right now, the thirst is real. And I'm hoping that Tales of Berseria, my number 1 pick for 2017, is going to help quench that thirst. I love JRPGs. I couldn't get enough in the 6th generation. They were bright and colorful and cartoony, anime-looking style things. But then the 7th generation rolled in. And then everything had to be these super realistic, hyper macho, military-looking shooters. No room for bright colors except for sepia tones.
Some people may say that I'm cheating by using this game as it was released in Japan in August of 2016, but it was released internationally in January of 2017, and since I live in America, I'm gonna go with the year it was released stateside. The first Tales game I ever saw was Tales of Symphonia on the GameCube, but I never got it. I was interested in it, but didn't follow through. I always thought that it was the first one until I looked it up. The first one, Tales of Phantasia, was back on the Super Nintendo in 1995, but we didn't get it until the Game Boy Advance in 2006. And by then, we already had Tales of Destiny, Eternia, Destiny 2, and Symphonia. There's 17 games in the main Tales series and has been going on for 21 years. There's also 15 spin-off games and 3 anime series. Did the Tales series just not gain popularity outside of Japan? And that's a legit question, as in Japan it seems to be just as popular as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, but it seems to be more of a niche title elsewhere. So this is my first experience with the Tales series, and I'll tell you right now, I was not disappointed at all. It started development in 2014. They made it for the PlayStation 3, but then ported it to the PS4 and PC in 2017 for international releases. Only Japan got the PS3 version in 2016. And you can't pull the wool over my eyes. I can gauge graphical generations by looking at the models. These are definitely 7th gen graphics, but you know what? They look great. The models and textures are so well done that it looks like I'm actually playing an anime. What's strange is that the game runs at 60 frames per second, but the further something is in the distance, the less frame rates that thing is moving at, giving it more of a 2D animated look. There's also 2D animated cutscenes that look fantastic, and are a real nice touch to the game, although most dialogue sections are animation stills, which a long time ago I found to be lazy, but now I kinda like it, especially how they did it here. The music is so awesome. I loved every track that played. The music for running through fields, the battle music, the emotional music that plays during the emotional scenes, the voice acting is top-notch, every voice fits each character that has spoken dialogue. Gameplay-wise, it's kind of a hybrid of many JRPG concepts. Each area, towns, fields, dungeons are all separated into their own little rooms, so it's not that open. Instead of having random battles, all the enemies are out in the open. And once you touch them, or they touch you, you're taken to a different screen that walls you off in an arena where you fight the enemies in real time, while your party members are controlled by the computer, like Kingdom Hearts. But unlike Kingdom Hearts, the mage characters do not spend all their mana in 2 seconds and then resort to physical attacks. Your character, Velvet Crow, attacks with a series of arts, tied to A, B, X, or Y, or X, circle, square, triangle if you're playing the PlayStation 4 version. I have the PC version, so I'll be using Xbox One controller terms. You can customize what arts are assigned to what buttons to chain up combos. You can press LB to block and then use the left analog stick to dodge out of the way. It's not as smooth as I would like it to be, but it works to get out of the way or close distance. RT will activate Velvet's Consuming Claw, which is called a Break Soul, which consumes a soul, ignoring chain limits, healing Velvet's HP if it makes contact and status ailments. However, enemies will gain 1 soul by doing this. However, it must make contact with an enemy, otherwise it just fizzles out, wasting a soul. It increases her speed and power, even letting her use powerful finishing moves, and upon activation and connection of an enemy, it replenishes her health, but it drains her health slowly and then rapidly. And even though it does do this, it's extremely abusable as long as you have the soul power to activate it continuously. You can even bring Velvet back to full health if used properly and quickly. Your soul gauge starts at 90 every battle, with 3 diamonds representing 30 soul each. Using martial arts consumes soul, hidden arts consume more, and you can attack with no soul, but your attacks are blocked and countered more frequently. And you can gain more souls by dodging at the right time, stunning or inflicting status ailments, or defeating enemies, allowing you to chain up more combos or use more break souls. Then there's Mystic Arts. Think of them as limit breaks, but instead of a limit bar you have a blast gauge. You can use a Mystic Art with a blast gauge of at least 3, and it can be upgraded higher with gear. Just hold LT during a combo and you'll perform a Mystic Art. What I really like about this combat system is that you can pick up and play, mash buttons and brute force your way through the game, or you can really take advantage of how the whole system works to maximize damage, upgrading the right gear, using the right characters at the right time. I found that I used Eleanor the least, due to her joining the party around the middle of the game, and I had already figured out good builds for the other characters, so she just sat on the sidelines. I kept her stuff upgraded, of course, but only so that she wasn't underpowered when I was forced to have her in the party. I always had Velvet, Laphicet, and Rhinoceros in my party, while using Eisen at the beginning and the end, with MacLeod in the middle, and let me tell you, I had these characters so overpowered that the final bosses were hardly a challenge. Another aspect of combat is dangerous encounters. When 2 or more enemies are close to each other, a dark aura appears under them in the overworld. There's a higher chance for item drops when the encounter is over, and after you finish the fight there's a chance a dire enemy can pop up. The first time I saw this I thought the game soft-locked, until this giant gorilla appeared. I had quite a few dire enemies show up, even with just regular encounters. From start to finish, just completing the main story with no side quests, the game is 45 hours, and while I've gotten pretty adept, not the best, I haven't had that much of a hard time at all. So the game is rather easy, because the characters all absorb HP pretty regularly, as most of the gear has an HP absorbability, so I finish fights with full HP almost all the time. I upgraded my equipment on a regular basis and tweaking everything to be planned for battle. I'm not even sure if I'm doing anything right when it comes to maximizing damage output while minimizing incoming damage, as the game keeps throwing more and more combat techniques at me. The game wasn't that much of a challenge, but I did have one really hard time due to enemy AI being cheap, where I got a game over, and there was one fight shortly before that, where I had to keep reviving my party members due to a dangerous encounter with all the same enemies in sync spamming the same move. But none of that ever happened again, so I don't know, it might have been a glitch for all I know. By pausing combat, you can switch control between any of the characters. When MacLeod and Eleanor join the party, you can switch between them and the characters you're controlling by pressing up or down. Then there's equipment. Certain types of equipment can only be used by certain characters, but then there's ones that can be shared. There's enhancing your gear, where you can dismantle other pieces of gear that you get, and you will get a lot as enemies drop a lot into their base components. Then use those components to upgrade the ones that you want. The stats you have are attack, defense, art attack, art defense, and focus, which is basically physical attack, physical defense, magic attack, magic defense, and a soul gauge recovery speed. I don't know what I did to Eisen, Rhinoceros, or Laphicet, but their blast gauge recovers faster than any of the other characters, as they pull off a Mystic Art at least every other battle. I love the world designs. They all have a nice fantasy look while having something of a light steampunk look to some of the towns and clothing styles. And there were times where I got lost and needed to look up a map or a strategy guide, and a joke among me and my friends is that if you get lost in a JRPG, then you're playing it right, because a lot of the maps are very maze-like, making it easy to get lost, especially the final dungeon, which has areas that look very similar, which caused me to backtrack unnecessarily more than once, although I still managed to get through it rather fast. All the characters are pretty much your stereotypical anime characters from recent times. Velvet was the former nice girl who became tough as nails after a tragedy and is after revenge, because it's always revenge. But being with her companion starts to bring out who she used to be. Rhinoceros is the guy that's meant to balance out Velvet's personality by being more lighthearted, tagging along out of a debt that he owes Velvet. Eisen is the experienced and wise one who's been there, done that. Laphicet is the kid with special powers that warms the main character's heart. He's curious about the world and has that childlike naivete, but it's curbed due to the influences around him. Magilu is the very annoying one that's never serious, takes everything as a joke, and is really just there for her own amusement, but she throws hints that she knows a lot more than she lets on. Even though she's encouraged to leave the group, she stays to see how it'll all end. She's meant to be the comic relief. Eleanor is supposed to be the sensitive, sweet, innocent girl that's completely naive to the world and the main bad guy's motives, seeing it through rose-colored glasses and is dedicated to her job, seeing the world as black and white. But being around this group of scoundrels removes those rose-colored glasses, allowing her to find her own way. In other words, she's the total opposite of Velvet. And as much of a stereotype these characters are, which is something that got me out of anime years ago, I love these characters. They're also typecasted that it's transcendent in a way to the point of them being original. But as the story progresses, they change and develop in ways that I haven't seen in an anime before. And I'm not going to spoil the story at all, and I really enjoyed it. The story has two major themes running through it, which is reason versus feelings and what it means to live. The guy that Velvet is after uses reason to explain his actions, and while logical to him and his ilk, doesn't make them right. Velvet is the opposite, where she's driven by her feelings and doing what she feels is right regardless of it being for revenge. But towards the end her motivations are somewhat changed while her end goal remains the same. Then there's the theme of what it means to live and what it means to be alive. If I were to explain that, it would spoil the story. There's also this thing about Velvet being selfish and doing things as a means to end, and how she's just as bad as the guy she's after, being two sides of the same coin, but if they didn't do what they did then they couldn't stop the bad guy. But again, if I explain too much then I'll spoil it, and I refuse to do that. There's just this dichotomy that's pretty philosophical when it comes to the story, where it makes you question what's good versus what's bad versus what's logical versus what's illogical versus order versus chaos versus freedom versus control. Those 8 ideas are all combined in different and multiple ways to explain the actions of the characters. And finally, when it comes to story elements, what is with anime and JRPGs having brothers and sisters having near incestuous relationships? I'm not talking about Velvet and the two Laphicets in the story. They have more of a mother-child relationship, which makes sense given the events of the story. But I'm talking about the characters Teresa and Oscar. If you play or have played the game, you'll see exactly what I mean. Their relationship is beyond creepy, and with how they talk about each other, you can tell, yeah, they bumped uglies more than once. There's quite a few collectibles in the game in the form of outfits that you acquire through cat spheres and minigames that award Tails coins, which you'll also find throughout the maps. Cat spheres are littered all over the world, and they also respawn, so there's no need to find every single one as they're used to open cat chests. Every other cat's chest will give you an item for outfits, so you can't try to skip chests to get the items you want. Then there's minigames that you can play for Tails coins, and then use those Tails coins for more outfits. Outfits will change the appearance of the party members, giving them hats, hairstyles, jewelry, clothes, and there's also a lot of DLC for different outfits, but I think they're a little too expensive. Bandai Namco has been known for really bad PC port jobs, Tales of Symphonia being one of the more infamous. I don't know, I haven't tried it yet, but I never had any issues with Berseria, so it's a really good port. I had so much fun with Tales of Berseria, and I really want to try more of the series. And this game gave me such an amazing, fantastical adventure that made me feel all the feels, and that's why it's my top game of 2017. And if you followed me on Twitter, something I highly recommend that you do as I ignore the propaganda machine known as Facebook, you probably saw this one coming.
I probably could not recommend this game any more than I already do. It is probably my favorite JRPG of all time, and that is why it's my #1 pick of Game of the Year for 2017. And it gives me a raging hard-on to bestow that title upon Tales of Berseria, because no other major gaming media outlet or YouTuber has even acknowledged this game or give it the credit it so sorely deserves.